on.
Whoops.
Over to you, Brian.
Hold on. I've just accidentally muted Reiner.
Yeah. Right. Can Reiner unmute?
I'm going to ask him to try.
Unmute it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
You're right, Reiner.
You're freely letting a few extra people in, I think, at the moment, Ian. Good on you, mate. Okay. Well, this is the last of the presentations for the Southern Sydney branch of the NPA for 2023. And we need speakers for 2024. So put your heads together, everybody, and offer when you're able to. I think that they're useful things to reach out to our members, and I'm hoping that as we're now just starting to return to them, that they become more regular. I suspect they'll become more regular when it gets into the colder winter months when it's already dark at 7 o'clock. People might be sitting out on the balcony with their glasses of Chardonnay at this particular time of the day. It is, of course, that we are all on Aboriginal lands, Indigenous lands, and that their lands have never been ceded. I here am in Dharawal land, and I recognise their ancestors past and present. You are all over the place and on different lands. I'd like to also recognise that I grew up on saltwater country, on Biripi land, and I still believe that's part of my heritage, and still fondly think of Biripi as the country from which I come. We have tonight Reiner Rehwinkel, what was your technical name when you worked with the department?
I was Senior Threatened Species Officer, and my job description, I actually worked on natural temperate grasslands and box gum woodlands, and the fauna and flora that inhabit those two threatened communities. And my job was to really work on all aspects of conservation of those communities.
And I have had the pleasure of going out into the field 3 times now with Reiner, twice to the Riverina and then again to the Monero. And I tell you what, spending a few days in the field with Reiner is like being in a university.
Oh.
I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. If you think that I am a slow coach looking at orchids and spending my time looking at birds, should go out with the people who like to look at grasslands. You can cover all 2 hectares in probably 6 hours and still not cover all the plants. And if I see Reiner and Margaret together, I fear that we might spend forever over the identification of one particular plant. But Reiner, it's great to actually have you here for us today. You've spent a fair bit of time lately wandering all over the place. And for those of you who have not seen Reiner's posts on his Facebook, he puts up the most delightful nature notes from a whole variety of sources. So today's presentation is way beyond just, say, a few birds or a few mammals. It's a full suite of stuff about the wildlife of Malaysia. Reiner, it's over to you. And do you want me to kickstart the slideshow, or do you want to wait for a while?
Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you very much for that introduction, Brian, and thank you for inviting me. I always relish the opportunity to talk about my travels, and I'd like to also acknowledge that I'm on Ngunnawal country here in beautiful Canberra.
And I hope that everybody can actually see the presentation. It's coming through my screen, so Reiner's going to have to nod occasionally to let me know when he wants me to change the slide.
Yeah, are you putting it up onto the slideshow mode, Brian?
I will be doing that, yep.
Thank you. Okay, so as you can see, I spent, it's only a short, this time only a short trip to Singapore and Malaysia. My usual haunts in that part of the world has been Borneo, and I've actually lost count of how many times I've been to Borneo. But I thought, well, this time I'd like to just sample the mainland, so to speak. Okay, Brian, next slide. And as I am an avid birder, apart from everything else, I use eBird. And this is an extract from my eBird trip report. So if anybody's not used eBird before, I highly recommend it. Apart from printing out these great maps to show you where you've been, it's a great way to store your data, and it's a huge repository of data of birds from all around the world. Next slide, thanks, Brian. So first stop, Singapore. We only spent a few days. When I say we, it was my wife, Marianne, and myself. Next slide, thanks, Brian. We only spent a few days there, but I figured that, and having done a bit of research, I know that there are quite a lot of natural areas in Singapore. So I did really spend pretty much all of the time in those natural areas. In fact, I don't think we actually even went into the main city at all. I was hoping to go to Raffles for a morning tea, but that didn't happen. The Gardens by the Bay, which you can see on the right there, is a really quite spectacular new addition to Singapore's, yes, I will say, natural areas. Those artificial trees are quite spectacular, but the gardens, and it's very extensive grounds, the gardens themselves are quite spectacular, with lots of tropical foliage, lots of tropical vegetation, and as a result, lots of bird life as well. Next slide, thanks, Brian. You walk through, and you startle these wonderful water monitors every so often. The dominant call is the call of the red jungle fowl, which you can see on the right. Of course, the red jungle fowl is the ancestor of our domestic chickens. They're quite common in the grounds of the gardens, but I have subsequently read that they are likely descendants of domestic stock which have gone wild. But nevertheless, that fine, handsome-looking fellow on the right is the way that the ancestral red jungle fowl presents itself in nature. So I figured that that's as close to nature as you'll get with the red jungle fowl. Rightio. Next one, thanks, slide. Next slide, thanks, Brian. Having walked down towards the city from where we were staying in our hotel along the banks of the river, we came across this delightful scene with river otters, and they were only, let me say, probably a kilometre from the heart of the city. There was a whole mob of them, probably about 8 or so, and they were playing, or they emerged from the river and ran up onto the bank, and they were playing on the bank. At the end of this presentation, I'll show you a little video, but you can see they're quite delightful little creatures, and it was a great surprise to me to see them in the centre of the city. I've seen river otters in wild places, in various other places, in Borneo, on the Kinabatangan River, and over in Peru, but I really wasn't expecting to see river otters in the heart of Singapore. Okay, next slide, thanks, Brian. Bird life in Singapore is quite spectacular. Amongst the most common bird is the black-naped oriole, which is, of course, a relative of our olive-backed oriole. They occur pretty much right throughout the city wherever there's big trees, and that's one of the delightful things about Singapore, is the fact that there are not only the big reserves but also very large trees lining the streets. Canberra prides itself as being the garden city, but I've got a feeling Singapore could probably pip it at the post, really. It's really quite a spectacular thing to see those broad tree-lined avenues and parklands. And so much so that the hornbill that you can see on the left, the oriental pied hornbill, can be seen right in the heart of the city as well. Now, I've just done a little research. Apparently, there has been a reintroduction program, and the most success successful reintroductions of southern pied, oriental pied hornbills, where there are large fig trees for the food, the hornbills being largely fruit eaters, and also large trees for the hollows that they nest in. So yeah, not a surprise to me to see the hornbill flying across the main street in Singapore. Right, next slide. Thanks, Brian. Orchid garden in the at the Botanic Gardens is quite a spectacular thing if you're into gaudy flowers. That's just a small, tiny selection of the orchids that I saw in the gardens. Now, of course, they're nothing like our delicate little beauties that we have in our forests and our bush woodlands. A lot of these are actually cultivars, cultivated varieties, but nevertheless, they're quite spectacular. And again, the bird life there was quite interesting. That's where I saw my first white-throated kingfisher for the trip, amongst other birds, of course. So not to be missed if you're into birds. And also a great spot for wildlife is the quite amazing zoo at Singapore. The zoo is actually right on the edge of the big reserve that covers the main central part of the island. Those pelicans are actually those pelicans are actually captive birds, but they're in a very nice wild setting. Now, one of my birders talk about targets. I'm sure you've all heard of this target business. I've been after this straw-headed straw-headed bulbul for many years. I've only ever heard one before, and that was in deep in the heart of Borneo. The straw-headed bulbul has suffered immensely from the bird trade because it's got a very, very beautiful voice, and hence it's been almost wiped out from most of those Asian countries, from Vietnam all the way down to Java and Bali. However, Singapore is a great stronghold, and these birds were putting on a fine display in the zoo itself. I also saw them in the the Dairy Farmer Hill Reserve. And another spectacular bird is that lovely thick-billed green pigeon. This is one of the 3 green pigeons which I've seen which I saw on my trip. Always nice to see this beautiful purple and green bird with a big, thick beak, which is obviously finely adapted to pluck fruits from the trees. Thanks, Brian. These shots were taken from the Dairy Farmers Hill Reserve. I was just walking through the rainforest and stopped to look at a bird, and suddenly there was this rattling at my feet, and I looked down, and this water monitor was within about a couple of meters or less than a meter of me, actually. It was quite unconcerned, just sat there and then waddled away slowly. The flower on the right is a tree. Now I just can't remember its name, but it's in the same family that we have our guinea flowers. And you can see the resemblance there, and the fruit at the bottom is the fruit of that plant. Okay. Now, another really, really spectacular reserve, and I think it's probably the most bird-rich earbird hotspot in all of Singapore, Sungai Boleh Reserve up in the north. In fact, if you go there, you can look across the strait onto Johor Bahru, which is in Malaysia. Those trees are mangroves, and if you look carefully, you can just see the buttress roots holding, or the stilt roots holding the trees up. And in the right-hand side, right-hand picture is a rather amazing looking spider. I was walking along there and I saw this photographer aiming into the forest, and I looked and I couldn't see anything, and I asked him what he was focusing on, and he said, "Oh, just there, it's just a spider." So there, I took the opportunity to take a photo of that spider as well. Sungai Boleh, yes, fantastic for bird life. It has populations of these 2 species of stork, the milky stork on the right and the painted stork on the left, and I believe that they're also hybridizing. Now, I'm not too sure. I think both species are actually introduced into Singapore, but they occur right through mainland Asia and Peninsular Malaysia. So I should take one step back. The previous bird photos that you've seen, with the exception of the red jungle fowl, are from eBird. If you look at the presentation, you'll see that I've kept the copyright and acknowledgements so that we know who the photographers were. But the red jungle fowl in this photo, which I'm particularly proud of, are mine. In fact, all of the photos that I've taken are taken with my iPhone. So once again, the painted stork on the left and the milky stork on the right. Next shot, thanks, Brian. So there's the eBird shots of those birds, the beautiful painted stork on the left, the milky stork at the top. The bird on the bottom right is the great-billed heron, which also occurs, of course, right across to northern Australia, where I haven't seen it. So this is another one that I've been looking at for many years on my trips to Asia. And yes, I've finally seen them in Singapore, of all places. Very well, thank you. Okay, so from there, we caught a bus across to Johor Bahru, from where we caught another bus to Malacca. Now, Malacca is, next shot, thanks, Brian. Malacca is a very historic and very, very multicultural city. Old Malay, one of the earliest Malay cities, was taken over successively by the Dutch and the Portuguese, and then the British took it over. And of course, it has the Chinese and Indian populations mixed in with the local Malay population. This is the home of the famous Nonya cuisine. So yeah, it's really quite an amazing place. And even here, next shot, thanks, Brian. Even here, wildlife abounded. We had a hotel which was 20 minutes walk from the centre of the city, and another 20 minutes in the opposite direction took me to the, it was called Bukit China, which is the Chinese hill, a huge area that contains cemeteries. And here I saw, amongst others, this lovely pink-necked green pigeon, which is the most common green pigeon through Asia, and some barbets, bee-eaters, white-throated kingfishers, and a whole bunch of other things. And this crocodile, this huge 1.5 metre long water dragon, was right in the middle of the city. Okay, thank you. So that was a brief stop. One of my main destinations for this trip to Malaysia is Bukit Fraser, or Fraser Hill, as we could say in English. Bukit Fraser is amongst the most visited and bird-rich areas in all of Malaysia. I've been there now a couple of times, and I find it absolutely fascinating. It's a truly wonderful place. Next slide, thanks, Brian. It was a British colony, and you can still see the British influence there with the telephone booth and the mailbox. Those imposing structures it's called the Silver Hills Resort, and a large complex with lots and lots of apartments. And we had an apartment in there overlooking, next slide, thanks, overlooking the rainforests. So what you can see there is actually the village. The village is nestled in amongst the trees, and pretty much every morning we'd hear gibbons howling, bird life galore. There are hundreds of swallows flying around. That wonderful green bird in the middle there, that's the fire-crested barbet, and that was one of the most common birds that you would see in the rainforest, particularly in the city or in the town. That lovely bird at the top is the silver-eared mesia. I think I might have seen one or two of them this time, but I certainly saw lots more on my previous trip. And that lovely great niltava, a beautiful bright glossy blue flycatcher, was also a very conspicuous and common bird. So yeah, highly recommend the trip to Bukit Fraser if you're into vegetation, if you're into culture, if you're into birds and mammals, and certainly if you're into food. And yeah, cheap accommodation. Yeah, it's great spot. Really enjoyed it. Next slide. Again, a couple of other birds which I saw more commonly last time. The beautiful green bird at the bottom is the common green magpie. I don't know why anything so beautiful should be called common. Unfortunately, I didn't see one this time, but I did see one on my previous trip. Magpie, what family does that belong to? It's actually a crow. It's actually in the corvid family. So it's related to our ravens and crows, and not related at all closely to our Australian magpies. The bird at the top is the orange-bellied or orange-breasted leaf bird. That's also quite a rare bird and quite commonly seen in Bukit Fraser. Next slide, thanks, Brian. So here you can see the view stretching away into the distance with rolling hills running way off in every direction. Beautiful tall tree ferns and quite amazing vegetation with fantastic flowers. The tree I think it might actually be a vine on the right. On the left is I don't know what it's called, but it's a plant which we'd call coliferous. It means that it has the flowers that emerge off the stem of the tree rather than in the leafy canopy. All right, next slide, thank you. There are lots of really nice trails that run in all directions through Bukit Fraser. You can really spend a lot of time. I spent many days, half-day walks. I had a hire car, so I could take myself off in any direction. The walks are perfectly safe. I didn't see any leeches. I didn't see any snakes, unfortunately. No hazards, and that's pretty much the thing that I've found with any of my walks in any of the rainforests through Asia, through Borneo and Peninsular Malaysia, even in Vietnam. I've never seen anything which I'd remotely call a hazard in any of these rainforests.
I'm going to interrupt you there, Reiner. I think you are just sheer lucky. I, for years, had a T-shirt as a result of Darnum Valley, which had on it the Darnum Valley Blood Donors Society. It was a huge leech with blood dripping out of its fangs.
No, Brian, I don't really consider a leech as a hazard. That's funny, isn't it? Been attacked by leeches on a number of occasions, but it's a bit like water off the duck's back for me.
And I also have to report, for those of you who have seen me walking here in Leech Country with those funny white stockings over my legs, they were invented on Bukit Fraser by my Malaysian Nature Society friends. Sorry, Brad.
No, yeah, well, I have been attacked by leeches. They're totally painless, of course. You only sort of become aware of it by suddenly looking down and seeing.
No, Ray, not the Darnum Valley ones. They forget.
Really?
They actually forget to give anaesthetic there. They have a different.
Well, I must have been lucky, Brian. There you go. Anyhow, look, I was going to talk about the tree on the right. Shifting focus back to nice things. The bright red leaf is a leaf of one of the dipterocarps. Dipterocarp is a family of trees from through Asia, and it's the most common and most dominant plant family within that, in the rainforests of Asia, and that's just one of them with that beautiful red leaf. Okay, next slide before we get creeped out. Some other birds which are a little bit more elusive. The bird on the lower left is golden-naped woodpecker. The sultan tit next to it, that beautiful black and yellow bird. The little brown bird is a speckled piculet, which is the smallest of the woodpeckers, and of course the red-headed trogon in the top right. All of these birds took a little bit of luck, I guess, and a bit of careful, patient looking for, but they're there, and it really just shows the diversity of birds in the rainforests of Malaysia. Next slide, thank you. Oh, that's tit again. I didn't realise I'd done that. The top two, the top left is the long-tailed broadbill. That's actually very common in the rainforest. And on the top right, the beautiful silvery-chested broadbill. There was a nest of one of these beautiful birds, or pair of these birds, relatively close to the path, and it was a major focus of a lot of the bird watchers, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. The Sunda scimitar babbler. Now, this is a babbler of the Asian families of babblers, and again, totally unrelated to our babblers in Australia. You can see the effects of convergent evolution there with the similar shape and the bill, and to some extent the communal habits and the vocalizations of the two families are pretty much similar, but they are unrelated. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Brian. Another series of shots of the wildflowers. The one on the top left is one of the wild orchids. The one on the top right is a little pea that grows in the grassy ground layer. Another dipterocarp leaf on the bottom right. Okay, next slide. How are we going for time, Brian? Okay. All right. The two bright red
no
ones,
problems. You've only gone a half an hour in so far.
very well.
Yeah,
The two
7:43.
bright red ones on the top left are gingers. The ginger family is very prominent in the rainforests through Asia. Grasses dominate, but only in the grassy clearing, the clearings of the rainforest where they grow on the edge of the rainforest. So the two at the top looks like some sort of bamboo type thing, but the one on the bottom right is a thermida related to our kangaroo grass. This one has heads which reach about 2 or 3 meters tall, and very graceful it is. And of course, ferns. Ferns are also very dominant, as you would imagine, just as much as they are in our cool rainforests in Australia. Next, thank you. And of course, invertebrates. Now, those two moths I find fascinating. It dawned on me that the moth there which is perched upside down on that, it's actually on a veranda post on a house. It looks like it's adapted by evolution to be mimicking moths sitting upright with those two white appendages mimicking antennae. And if a bird were to think, oh, there's a tasty meal, I'll go straight for the head, of course, there's nothing there. It's just a gap. And it gives the moth a chance to fly away. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. There's a very large centipede, which I've seen also in Borneo. In fact, I've seen them crawling in and out of the shoes that people stack up on the outside of their rooms as they go to sleep. So it's always
a millipede.
A millipede, you're right. That's a millipede. Thank you. And while I didn't see the sort of huge beetles that I've seen in Borneo with the huge rhinoceros beetles, they're quite large beetles, and spiders there as well. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Brian. So after a bit of a spell, about 5 or 6 days, we travelled northwards. My aim was to spend a few days in the national park, Taman Negara, but approaching it from the western side, which is the less visited side. We stopped in a little town called Pulai, where we had our accommodation. Okay, next slide, thanks. Pulai is in the heart of an agricultural zone, so you can see rubber, open pastures for cattle. The fruit on the right, I'm sure everybody knows, is the durian. Apparently the best durians come from that part of somebody's eaten durian before. Apparently the best durians come from that part of Malaysia. Now that structure on the lower right is a swift house. It's a house or a building which is erected to house swifts for the harvesting of their nests, which the Malaysians export to China and other markets as edible nests for mostly for medicinal uses. So, yes, so Pulau is a very attractive little region. Next slide, thank you. The heart of the town was dominated by this large courtyard with a beautiful, very, very beautiful Chinese temple. And across the little creek, accessed via the suspension bridge, another temple at the base of that karst mountain in the background. So I found that very, very beautiful little area. More agriculture in the region, of course, not as much as what I had expected to see, but there's in that particular area, right abutting the national park, actually is oil palm plantations. The shot on the left, upper left, is the plantation, and the two on the right is a nursery, and you can see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little plants which are growing to replace or to establish new plantations. The sign on the bottom left talks about the threatened species which are likely to be seen in the area, and talks about the need to protect them. I found it a little bit ironic that the sign was placed right next to the oil palm plantation, which has actually destroyed habitat for those species, but we won't go there for now. Okay, next, thank you. Now that's the third of the third of the green pigeons. This is the little green pigeon, and the bird on the bottom right is the woodcock. It's a bird very much like our swamp hen, but all black with a red fleshy crest. So yeah, the green pigeons are endlessly varied. So the western access to Taman Negara, the big national park in Peninsular Malaysia, is, as I said, very much less visited than the eastern section where I've actually been before. I arrived thinking that I could actually just drive in and just noodle about. Next slide, thank you. But unfortunately, they had recently introduced a new statute which said that you can only visit the park with a guide, and I tried to hire a guide on the day, but that wasn't possible, unfortunately. So I had to contend with walking around the park entrance area where there was a huge boardwalk, which was really, really great, and a very nice river with, again, lots of wildlife in that particular region, particular area. From the boardwalk, you could hear the helmeted hornbills whooping in the distance. And the mountain that you can see on the top right is the tallest mountain in Peninsular Malaysia. The bird, I don't know whether most people can see it, seems to be obscured by the there you go, the tiny little bird there is a small species of woodpecker, which I saw at Sungai. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this map shows, surprisingly, how much vegetation, woody vegetation, or how much forest country remains in Peninsular Malaysia. So the area of 5.73 million hectares of forest cover remains of the total area of 13.1 or 13.2 million hectares. So there is a considerably large area of forest remaining on Peninsular Malaysia. There's also obviously a lot of clearing which has happened for agriculture and palm oil plantations. But the national park, as you can see in the right shot, the map on the right, covers 430 351 hectares. So it's a very, very large area, and a considerable proportion of the Peninsula Malaysia. So Taman Negara contains 7.6 of Peninsula Malaysia's forest cover. So it's a particularly large area that's still protected and still forested on the peninsula. Okay, next, thank you. Back we were, as I said, we were going to stay there for about a week, but with the need to have a hired guide, and also it was extremely hot. And Bukit Fraser is very cool, so we decided to go back to Bukit Fraser for a few more days. Next slide, thank you. While I was there, I became, because of course you meet other bird watchers, and I became aware that there was a very rare bird that had been sighted, and that's the Himalayan cutia. The Himalayan cutia occurs right through the Himalayas, but there's an isolated population in the highlands of Malaysia. And as you can see, it's a very, very beautiful bird in the family of Asian babblers. It has the habit of a tree creeper, very beautifully coloured. Now, this bird was like a honeypot to the bird photographers, and I was quite dismayed because every time I went past this spot where this bird had been seen, there were literally dozens of these bird watchers with their expensive cameras clicking away endlessly, and more disturbingly, they had recordings of the bird's call to attract the birds, and they played that at full volume. So as a natural experience, it left a lot to be desired. The same situation occurred, but to a lesser degree, at the nest of the silver-breasted broadbill that I showed you before. So wherever there was a rare bird or a record of a rare bird, unfortunately, there were also lots of bird watchers, bird photographers, and very noisy with their camera, with their recorders recording to try to attract the birds. And if they're not using recordings to attract the birds, they also use mealworms. And there's another spot down the road from where we were staying where you could almost be guaranteed to go past and there'd be birds hopping out of the undergrowth looking for mealworms. And that was the only place I saw this little cuckwing. It's another very rare bird in a very unique family from Asia. 6 species that occur from Vietnam down to Timor. And I'd never thought I'd see one, but there it was, this cute little tailless mouse of a bird, but it hopped out of the rainforest onto the edge of the road, did a bit of bobbing about, found a mealworm, and then disappeared again. So, you know, it's not really natural bird watching, but nevertheless, it was nice to see these 2 rare birds. Okay, next slide. Leaving Bukit Fraser, we headed back to KL for our last few days, and I had the opportunity to spend a morning at the Putrajaya Wetland Park. Putrajaya is a modern planned city, seems to be a bit of a seat of government. The main Parliament House apparently is in KL itself. This city is about 20 kilometres south of KL, and it had the most amazing, huge, modern structures, open parklands, and apparently this wetland park is reputed to be one of the largest wetland parks in Asia. Next slide, thank you. It had quite large areas of wetland and lots of beautiful tropical vegetation. Wetland hosted quite a lot of different species, as did the vegetation above the wetlands. So if ever you have an opportunity to go to KL, certainly Putrajaya Wetland Park is worth seeing just for the wetland birds and vegetation. Okay, next, thank you.
I'm guessing, Reiner, that those Putrajaya wetlands, this is a Mahathir Mohamad vanity project, Putrajaya, but I'm guessing that they look to me like old scrapings from some of the tin mining days that have been rehabilitated.
I think you're right, Brian. I think you're absolutely correct there. So they put them to very good use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly that's a very good observation, Brian. It certainly is a huge vanity project. Just to demonstrate, however, how the Malays are quite into birding and studying nature, there was a sign there which had this QR code, and I actually tried it from my photograph the other day. If you do have an opportunity, you can actually run your camera over the QR code on the left, and it'll open up into a wonderful little bird guide of the birds of Putrajaya, which I found quite fascinating. So they've gone to a lot of trouble to inform and educate their population. Amongst the spectacular birds that I saw there was the gold-whiskered barbet. Barbets are a family of birds related to to woodpeckers, and it's a family or the order that contains the woodpeckers and barbets is completely absent from Australia. So the gold-whiskered barbet, and below that is the purple heron. Okay, next slide, thank you. And that ends the PowerPoint. So Brian, if you'd like to run that that video now, please.
Keep talking while I escape all
Yeah.
this so I can get to the other page.
Well, Reiner, an immediate question. We have we're lucky to have this member called Ross Jeffrey. He's a professor and he's very much a champion of the 30 by 30 regime, you know, so that by 2030, 30% of the land mass and sea mass is preserved. And I noticed in a previous slide there, you were showing that Malay Peninsula, I think that you were showing the forested area is something like 46 or 40 something percent.
Yeah.
And you showed also that the national park, the big central one was 7.6%. I guess the question is, of those forested areas, what percentage of those are preserved, and would it be possible to find out with the Malay Peninsula what percentage of that peninsula is already national parks rather than just
That's a good question. Sorry, Ian, isn't it? Look, that's Yes, certainly. I went to the website, went to Google to try to work out, and there was so much conflicting information, even as to how much vegetation or woody vegetation was retained. But you can, I think, with a bit of research, you could actually work out the total area of the national parks. There's more than just that one national park. Other large. And of course, that forest cover does include production forest and plantation, but I don't think it includes palm oil plantations. But yeah, so Malay, I think, you know, we here in the West talk about the rape or the damage that palm oil plantation does, but I think we should really pull our heads in and start thinking about how Australia has treated our woodlands and grasslands and our rainforests and our forests before we start criticising a country like Malaysia, which is a developing country.
And Gary would add, and rightly so, our marine environment too. There's so little of our marine environment protected. And I think New South Wales, we're only up to about 9% of the total state preserved. So, you know, it sounds like Malaysia's got a good foot in the door to maybe go past us at the moment.
Taman Negara, by the way, is one of the least inspiring names I've ever seen for a national park. Taman means park, Negara means national. It's a bit like what the national park, which became the Royal National Park. It's just because it was the first one, but it is a most impressive park, Reiner.
It is wonderful, yeah.
I remember sitting on a balcony drinking drinks on the edge of the park and counting 4 species of hornbill while drinking, and that was before I got drunk.
Yeah, no, and look, that goes for Borneo. Look, Brian, you've probably been to Borneo. Borneo is a bit like that.
Indeed, yeah.
You go to a place like Mulu or Danam Valley, Kinabatangan River, and the wildlife is just so abundant and so, yeah, it's so easy to see.
Yeah.
All right, look, Borneo, I think may have slightly larger percentage, or Malaysian Borneo might have slightly larger percentage of palm oil plantations. I remember traveling for a full day and seeing palm oils all the way. But there certainly are still very, very large areas of untouched rainforest, even in Borneo.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll share screen and see if I can find that video again.
I'll see what the chats are saying. Ferocious looking beaks, Ruth. Yes, I guess big beaks like the hornbills are adapted to eating fruit, and the big bills of those storks are for mollusks and fish. So I don't know whether they're actually ferocious. Yeah, cryptic.
Do you want to watch those otters rolling around again?
Are you ready?
Here, let's do it again.
Sorry, say it again. Not happening.
No, we're just
Are you
like
showing the video?
saying you, Reiner.
Pardon?
Yeah, I'm just repeating the...
The video?
Yep.
It hasn't come through.
Did you people see it, the video?
No.
No.
Oh, I thought I shared it. Oh, let me go back.
Try again, please.
I got a good view of it.
Well, we're happy about that.
Oh, I can't. Oh, I see.
Oh, don't worry, Brian.
Tell you what. I will. I will clip the hyperlink and put it in the chat so everybody can watch it later on.
That's the way. Good. Great. Very well. So are there any questions apart from the ferocious looking beaks?
They seem to be sort of a follow on from those extraordinary beaks. The beak itself below that extraordinary top part, they seem to be something like a South American toucan, don't they, with that banana shaped beak? They
are in fact hollow, porous, with the exception of the helmet. There's one species whose name escapes me, and the beak's solid, and it was actually overhunted or overexploited for ivory. So the beak has the same, or that.
God knows how I got in.
Trumpeter hornbill, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So it has the same.
For those of you who are not aware of the Asian hornbills, I think it has to be the most extraordinary bird of trust ever. The lady gets sealed up inside a cavity to sit on the eggs and can only be released by the male afterwards. If he dies, she's stuck in there. If he decides to run off and divorce her, she's stuck in there. It is an exercise of faith, if ever there was one, and I don't recommend it for most couples.
Yeah, and the thing about hornbills is they're extremely diverse. There are quite a large number of species. They occur from the Philippines through Sulawesi, Moluccas. I haven't actually seen a wild one, but they also occur in New Guinea and the Solomons. There's another species that occurs from New Guinea to the Solomons, and right across to Africa and all the way to South Africa.
Yeah,
a very, very diverse group of birds.
One bird that you did not mention, Reiner, that to me is the sound of Singapore. I don't think I've ever been anywhere in any parts of Singapore without hearing coppersmiths.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that was the barbet that was very, very common in the Chinese cemetery at Malacca. I am trying to think, did I actually hear it at Singapore? I don't think I did.
No.
No.
They must be Trappist monks there at the moment.
So are there any other questions?
Have there been any people here? Before I ask for questions, and I think there's a fair few people of interest here who've got lots of, but I will tell you one story about Sungai Buloh, which will link it to Bukit Fraser. I thought I had discovered the site of all sites the first time I visited Sungai Buloh. I was catching the train the next day from Singapore. This is in the days when the Malaysians actually owned a narrow corridor right through Singapore to the centre of town. You got on the train and you were in Malaysian territory in that narrow cutting until you got all the way across the causeway, and then you were free to relax all the way into KL. So the next day I went up and stayed with two friends of mine, husband and wife, who used to be the BirdLife International coordinators for all of Southeast Asia. And I told them about this wonderful reserve that I discovered at Sungai Buloh. And being English, he just said, yeah, okay. I tell you what, I'll go and get us a drink. And as he came back with whatever an Englishman brings, i.e. a gin and tonic, he also brought a huge document with him. And he gave it to me before the drink and said, these are the plans I drew up when we created that reserve. And he then said, and the person who provided the funding also owns a bungalow. Now, you should see what a bungalow is in a hill station on Bukit Fraser. Bukit, by the way, for those of you who haven't yet worked it out, merely means hill in Malay. And we're staying in his house, his bungalow. And he has a lovely Chinese cook on call the entire time. So we'll be all right for food. And I was getting very, very hungry. Now, the guy who provided the funding was a multi-millionaire Chinese businessman out of Hong Kong. And being a Chinese businessman out of Hong Kong, now living in Singapore, his loyalties lay to the empire. And that Chinese cook, every night we were on Bukit Fraser, surrounded by all the birds that Reiner saw, provided us with English roasts and Yorkshire pudding as our main meal. So there in Malaysia is a heart of the empire still. Okay. Questions?
It is. It's very British. You walk around the picket fences and the pretty gardens and the old colonial style buildings. It is. It's quite an interesting place.
You can get what they call hill stations right through the empire. India and the French also have them in Vietnam.
Well, that's right. I stayed in one in Vietnam. I've stayed in Darjeeling, which is a British hill station. Canberra's a nice hill station too, by the way.
Yeah. Now, come on, Graham. You've got a million questions, surely, for a man who goes bird banding.
We stayed at the Tamanagara some years ago on a trip. I remember one morning we went to this tree and all the bird watchers were there, and there were, I think, 8 species of bulbul in this one tree. It was amazing. We were trying to identify all these different bulbuls, and there's 8 species here.
Yeah, good luck with that. They're very difficult, some of them, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I hate to tell you, Reiner, I actually seen straw-necked bulbuls now in about 3 different locations.
Oh, is that not? That's right. Well, yeah. I'm so pleased that I've seen them in Singapore. I was expecting it. Oh, and Boleh Sungai, what's it called? The
Sungai Buloh. Yeah.
Sungai Boleh. I saw a huge crocodile there as well in the one of the canals that run through it. So very, very primeval, that place, and very, very beautiful. Yeah.
You obviously didn't get on one of the bum boats at Changi and went across to Pulau Ubin either, by the sound of this.
No, look, we only had a limited time in Singapore, and like in any of those trips, you pick your trips and leave the other spots for the next time around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other favourite spots over there, Graham, apart from Taman Negara?
Yeah, that Fraser Hill, that was fabulous. We spent about 3 or 4 days there, I think, exploring all around there. And yeah, that's probably our favourite place, actually. Even though we did go to Borneo afterwards, we actually enjoyed Fraser Hill more than anywhere else, I think.
There's a even better hill, I think, a bit further north called Maxwell's. I don't know if you've ever bird watched there.
I Ryan did the one trip there 7 or 8 years ago.
Maxwell's and Port Dickson are both excellent spots for when the raptor migration occurs.
Got a little map here. We're just checking on where that is. Yeah.
The other hill station at there's two. There's Cameron Highlands, which is a bit to the north.
Yeah.
I spent a week there many years ago, and that was really good. But the other one is the Genteng Highlands, and
Yes.
I haven't been there, and I don't think I ever want to go there.
They've got a casino there nowadays.
We had a fine view of it from our apartment. You can look straight across the valley to the hill behind, and I described it as a pimple on a pumpkin. It was a collection of really high hotel towers, and then of course you do a bit of exploring to see what it actually looks like on the internet, and it looks totally super crass and over the top. Apparently it is a good birding spot, but I don't think I'd ever find myself there.
Yeah. Any questions? We've had Gary say thank you very much, and Ruth both had to go.
That's fine.
Was that your hand, Liz? Be around the corner.
Great talk. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Departing.
Yeah.
And Michelle. Okay. Well, it looks, Reiner, like they're all starting to run away.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
somebody's out of power.
And that was Ruth. That was Ruth.
Zoom is it does eat up your power, I've noticed. Yeah. So thank you everybody for paying attention, and thanks for inviting me, Brian. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you again sometime down there in one of the grasslands.
That's the way. Good.
And I just like to say thank you, Reiner, for a stunning collection of birds. It was extraordinary. It really was. Those green pigeons are beautiful, and
they are,
vibrant colours, and together with those beaks, it was an extraordinary collection. So for the ignorant, thank you so much.
He obviously failed with whistling thrushes.
I did record a whistling thrush somewhere along the line, but just can't remember now. Yeah.
They are really hard to catch on a camera.
No. Try going to Denham Valley. They're really common there. Yeah.
They're really hard to capture though. They like skulking in the undergrowth.
Yeah, they're a beautiful bird. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Yeah.
I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'll
You're going to close everybody down here?
First of all, reactions. We better have a clap. There's the clap.
Lovely.
And then what we'll do is we'll go to stop recording. So let's stop recording.